The Billionaire Mindset. The real reason the rich think differently now. There's a moment in life when you realize something powerful, something almost uncomfortable. The difference between people who struggle for every dollar and people who seem to attract wealth effortlessly isn't luck, opportunity, or intelligence. It's mindset. A very specific way of thinking that billionaires protect, cultivate, and operate from every single day. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Today, I'm going to take you behind that curtain. Not with cliches, not with motivational fluff, but with the psychological, emotional, and strategic truths that explain why the rich think differently now, and how you can start rewiring your mind to think the same way. Because the moment your thinking changes, your life changes. And if you're here, it means you're ready to create that shift. Topic 1. The moment you realize money was never the real problem. There comes a moment on the path to prosperity when something inside you breaks open, and you finally understand that money was never the real obstacle standing between you and the life you want. The real barrier has always been the way you were taught to think, the beliefs you accepted as truth, and the invisible limits you inherited without even noticing. Every billionaire, every self-made millionaire, every person who rose from nothing and built extraordinary wealth eventually reaches this same moment of awakening. It is the instant when they stop looking at money as the cause of their limitations and begin recognizing it as the result of their thinking. And once this realization happens, their entire relationship with possibility changes. Think about Jeff Bezos sitting in a tiny office, sketching the early concept of Amazon with no guarantees, no investors begging for a chance to fund him, no roadmap to becoming the richest man in the world. What he did have was a mind capable of asking a question the average person never asks. What could exist if I stopped assuming I'm limited? That single thought, that willingness to imagine beyond his circumstances, was the first brick in the empire he eventually built. This is the kind of thinking that separates people who struggle financially from those who become unstoppable creators of wealth. The difference is not luck, it is not privilege, it is not timing. It is a decision, repeated over and over, to think beyond the boundaries of one's current reality. Most people never make that decision because they are trapped in stories they don't even know they are telling themselves. Stories inherited from parents who struggled, teachers who meant well but didn't understand wealth, friends who feared judgment, or society that equates dreaming big with being unrealistic. Without noticing, people internalize these narratives until they become their identity. They look at their bank account and assume it defines who they are. They feel fear and assume it means stop rather than try. They experience failure and assume it means they were foolish to believe they could have more. Billionaires, however, flip this script entirely. They understand that beliefs shape decisions, decisions shape behaviors, and behaviors shape destiny. If the belief is too small, the life will be too small. Change the belief, and destiny bends with it. This truth becomes clear when you look at someone like Oprah Winfrey, who grew up facing challenges so overwhelming that most people in her situation would have collapsed under the weight of them. Poverty, trauma, instability. She had every reason to believe wealth was impossible for someone like her. But she made a different choice. She interpreted pain as fuel, not evidence of limitation. She decided her past was not a life sentence, but a launching pad. When she said, "Create the highest, grandest vision possible for your life," it wasn't a motivational slogan. It was the philosophy that saved her. She understood early that if she didn't expand her mind, nothing in her external world would ever expand. This is the essence of billionaire thinking: internal expansion before external expansion. This shift is not poetic. It is practical and rooted in neuroscience. The brain constantly filters the world based on what it believes is relevant. When you believe you are limited, your brain becomes blind to opportunities because it assumes opportunities don't matter to someone like you. When you believe you are capable of extraordinary things, your brain begins searching for pathways, solutions, connections, ideas, and strategies that were invisible before. The world hasn't changed. Your filter has. That is why two people can live in the same neighborhood with the same upbringing, the same struggles, and the same apparent disadvantages, and one becomes a millionaire while the other stays stuck. One changed their mental filter, the other kept the one society handed them. And here is the uncomfortable part. Staying in a mindset of limitation feels safe. It protects you from risking embarrassment, from failing publicly, from being judged, from trying something huge and discovering it didn't work. The mind convinces you that staying small is logical. But this so-called safety comes at a cost, the cost of the life you were meant to build. Playing it safe is expensive when it steals your potential. Every billionaire has felt this tension, this fear, this internal resistance. But they chose expansion anyway. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they understood that fear is a sign of growth, not a warning to retreat. They knew that the comfort zone is not a place, it is a cage. Money, therefore, is not the first thing that changes in a wealthy person's life. The first change is identity. They begin to see themselves as someone capable of designing their future rather than reacting to their past. They begin to believe that their thoughts matter, that their vision matters, that their desires are not fantasies but instructions for the life they are meant to create. When Elon Musk was sleeping on a couch in his early 20s, building Zip2 while barely eating, he wasn't thinking like a broke man. He was thinking like someone whose ideas could reshape entire industries. When Sarah Blakely started Spanx with a few $1,000s and no experience in fashion, she didn't let her lack of knowledge define her. She allowed her belief in possibility to guide her actions. These are not anomalies. These are patterns. So, pause for a moment and absorb this. Nothing outside of you needs to change for you to begin thinking like a billionaire. Not your job, not your income, not your environment, not the amount of support you have. The shift begins internally, with the decision to challenge your inherited beliefs, question the limitations you've accepted, and claim responsibility for the life you're creating. This internal shift is the single most transformative moment in a wealth journey. It is the instant when your mind opens, your perspective expands, and you finally understand that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the story you continue to believe. When you rewrite that story, everything else begins to align. Your habits shift, your choices become bolder, your energy becomes more focused, your vision becomes clearer. You begin moving through life not as someone hoping to escape scarcity, but as someone building toward abundance. You stop waiting for circumstances to improve and start improving yourself. And that is the moment everything changes. Because when the mind cracks open, the world follows. Topic 2. Why billionaires see possibility where others see limitation. If there is one psychological distinction that separates billionaires from the average person, it is this. They have trained their minds to see possibility long before evidence appears. They are not reacting to the world. They are anticipating it. They are not waiting for proof. They are moving toward potential. This is why the same situation that feels like a dead end to most people looks like a doorway to someone with a billionaire mindset. It's not that billionaires are born with better opportunity sensing abilities. It's that they learned, often the hard way, that the human mind naturally gravitates toward fear. And unless you retrain it, you will only see what could go wrong instead of what could go right. This invisible difference in perception is one of the most powerful separators of wealth. Think about someone like Steve Jobs, who returned to Apple when the company was on the verge of collapse. Most people saw a sinking ship. Investors saw risk. Critics predicted disaster. But Jobs didn't focus on the evidence of failure around him. He focused on the possibility hidden underneath the chaos, the potential for innovation that could redefine entire industries. The iPod didn't exist yet. The iPhone didn't exist yet. The iPad didn't exist yet. But they existed in his mind, and that was enough for him to act. Billionaires live in a state where the future feels more vivid than the present, and because they believe those possibilities are real, they behave in ways that bring them to life. This ability is not mystical. It is psychological conditioning. Most people are taught from childhood to fear mistakes, avoid risks, play safe, and think inside predefined boxes. They are taught to obey limitation instead of challenge it. So when they face uncertainty, their minds immediately latch onto what could go wrong. But the billionaire mindset flips this internal wiring. Instead of asking, "What if this fails?" they ask, "What if this works? What if this changes everything? What if this is the opportunity I've been waiting for?" And that single shift in questioning leads to decisions that most people will never make. Take the example of Walt Disney, who declared bankruptcy, failed multiple times, and was told by bankers that his ideas were too unrealistic to invest in. Yet every failure, Every rejection, every setback simply reinforced his belief that possibility was more important than approval. He wasn't trying to fit into the world that already existed. He was trying to build a world that didn't exist yet. When he imagined Disneyland, people laughed. They mocked him. They said he was dreaming too big, aiming too high. Today, that dream is one of the most profitable entertainment empires in human history. Possibility is not about fantasy. It is about refusing to let external voices be louder than your internal vision. But here is what most people misunderstand. Billionaires do not see possibility because they are fearless. They see possibility because they have learned to manage fear differently. They know fear is a natural response to the unknown, not a stop sign. They know their emotions are data, not dictators. They know that if they wait for certainty, they will wait their entire lives. When fear arrives, they don't retreat. They lean in. They analyze it. They use it to sharpen their thinking instead of shrink their dreams. The average mind interprets fear as danger. The billionaire mind interprets fear as relevance, a sign that the opportunity is big enough to matter. This shift in interpretation creates a profound difference in behavior. When an average person encounters a challenge, they stop to evaluate it. They hesitate. They overthink. They talk themselves out of action. Meanwhile, the billionaire begins moving, not recklessly, but decisively. Vision gives them courage. Possibility gives them direction. They understand that momentum creates clarity, not the other way around. Many of the world's greatest companies were built before their founders had all the answers. Think of Larry Page and Sergey Brin building Google in a tiny dorm room, not knowing it would one day become a global infrastructure for information. Think of Howard Schultz traveling to Italy, walking past cafes, realizing that the coffee experience could transform American culture, and then returning home to build what would eventually become Starbucks. These ideas began not as certainties, but as possibilities, fragile, vulnerable, and easy to ignore if their creators had been trained to focus on limits instead of potential. There is a powerful psychological principle at play here. The mind expands in direct proportion to the size of the possibility it is allowed to contemplate. When you allow yourself to imagine small, your decisions become small. When you allow yourself to imagine big, your energy rises to match that vision. Billionaires constantly expose themselves to environments, conversations, problems, and challenges that stretch their thinking. They immerse themselves in big ideas, because big ideas activate a different level of cognitive engagement. The average person thinks about what they can achieve. Billionaires think about what humanity can achieve, and then identify their role within that expansion. Possibility becomes a habit. It becomes a filter through which they view life. And once that filter is installed, everything looks different. A market crash becomes a chance to acquire undervalued assets. A failure becomes a chance to rebuild smarter. A loss becomes a test of character that sharpens resilience. A crisis becomes fertile ground for innovation. This is why, during economic downturns, when most people panic and tighten their financial lives in fear, billionaire wealth often multiplies. They are not immune to difficulty. They are simply trained to look beyond it. And here is the most important truth. The ability to see possibility is not reserved for the wealthy. It is a muscle anyone can develop. It begins with the decision to stop forcing your future to look like your past. It begins with catching yourself when your mind defaults to limitation and consciously choosing to ask bigger questions. It begins with allowing yourself to imagine outcomes that scare you because they feel too good, too big, too expansive. Most people shut down their imagination because it makes them uncomfortable. Billionaires open theirs wider for the same reason. Imagine what would happen if you started doing the same. Imagine if you gave yourself permission to think bigger than your environment. Imagine if you stopped measuring your life by what has been and started measuring it by what could be. Imagine if you treated your dreams with the same seriousness billionaires treat their visions. Everything would change, not gradually, but immediately. Not because the world would shift instantly, but because your perception would. You would start to see openings where you once saw walls. You would start to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You would start to feel capable where you once felt stuck. The truth is simple but transformative. You cannot attract a life you cannot first imagine. Billionaires see possibility because they choose to, repeatedly, intentionally, and unapologetically. And the moment you begin doing the same, you step onto the same psychological path that leads to expansion, prosperity, and the kind of success most people never allow themselves to pursue. Topic 3. The identity shift. Why billionaires become wealthy before they are rich. There is a hidden truth about billionaires that most people never understand, and because they don't understand it, they never reach their true potential. Billionaires become wealthy internally long before the world recognizes them as rich. Their bank accounts catch up to their identity, not the other way around. Wealth, in its truest form, is not an external achievement, but an internal transformation. It is a shift in how someone sees themselves, what they believe is possible for their life, and what they decide they are worthy of receiving. And until that shift happens, all the strategies in the world, every book, every course, every financial technique will fall flat. Identity is the engine. Money is just the echo. Most people operate from the identity they inherited, not the identity they consciously choose. They say things like, "I'm just not good with money. I'm not the kind of person who becomes wealthy. I wasn't born into the right circumstances." Or, "I don't know enough to succeed." These statements feel like facts, but they are really beliefs disguised as truth. Every billionaire had to confront these beliefs at some point. They had to look at the identity they had been conditioned to accept and ask a bold, life-altering question: who do I actually want to be? That question becomes the beginning of their rise. Consider the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx and one of the youngest female self-made billionaires in history. Before she had millions, before she built a global empire, she worked selling fax machines door to door, facing rejection every single day. Nothing in her environment suggested she was destined for wealth. But Sarah didn't internalize the identity of a struggling salesperson. Instead, she cultivated the identity of a creator, an innovator, someone who believed she could bring a new idea to life. When she cut the feet off her pantyhose to create the first prototype of Spanx, there was no applause, no validation, no guarantee. But internally, she had already shifted. She believed she could create something massive, and that belief shaped every decision she made. Her wealth began the moment her identity expanded. Identity acts like a thermostat. No matter how much external success someone experiences, if their internal thermostat is set to scarcity, fear, doubt, or unworthiness, they will sabotage themselves until their outer world matches their inner setting. You've seen this happen with lottery winners who become rich overnight, but lose everything within a few years. They gained money, but they never shifted the identity that could sustain it. Billionaires, however, turn the thermostat up long before they have any wealth to support it. They become the kind of person capable of building, managing, and expanding wealth before a single dollar shows up. And because identity drives behavior, their actions begin aligning with that higher version of themselves. Look at Elon Musk when he sold his first company, Zip2. Instead of keeping his millions and living comfortably, he reinvested almost everything into building XCOM, which later became PayPal. And after selling PayPal, he repeated the pattern, putting nearly all his wealth into Tesla and SpaceX. The average person would have said, "This is too risky," because their identity is built around protecting what they have. Musk operated from a different identity entirely, one built around innovation, impact, and expansion. He didn't behave like a man afraid of losing money. He behaved like a man convinced he was meant to reshape the future. His identity came first. His billions arrived later as a natural consequence. Identity influences not just decisions, but the level of responsibility a person is willing to accept. Billionaires don't wait for someone to guide them, instruct them, motivate them, or reassure them. They adopt an identity rooted in leadership, personal accountability, and relentless self-direction. They don't say, "I hope this works." They say, "I will make this work." That internal shift turns obstacles into stepping stones because the person facing them has changed. The billionaire identity doesn't crumble when confronted with difficulty. It adapts, evolves, and strengthens. One of the most striking examples of identity shift is the story of Jim Carrey, long before he was famous. He drove up into the Hollywood Hills and wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered, dated years into the future. He kept that check in his wallet until the ink faded, not because he was delusional, but because he was intentionally expanding his identity into alignment with the life he wanted to create. When the world eventually paid him exactly that amount for the movie Dumb and Dumber, it wasn't magic. It was alignment. His identity had already risen to meet that level of success, and reality simply followed suit. Identity is powerful because it dictates what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you attract, and what you feel worthy of receiving. If your identity is rooted in survival, you will never take the leaps required to build wealth. If your identity is rooted in scarcity, you will always cling to what you have instead of expanding toward what you want. If your identity is rooted in fear, you will misinterpret opportunities as dangers. But if your identity is rooted in abundance, expectation, vision, and personal power, your entire life reorganizes itself around that truth. You begin making choices that build momentum. You begin taking actions that amplify your potential. You begin surrounding yourself with people who elevate your thinking instead of reinforcing your limitations. It's important to understand that identity shift is not about pretending or faking confidence. It is about choosing consciously who you want to become and taking daily actions that reinforce that new identity until it becomes your default programming. When Jeff Bezos was working a stable job in finance, he had a clear identity shift moment. He realized he could either stay on a predictable path or take a risk that aligned with the person he wanted to become, a creator of something unprecedented. The regret minimization framework he used wasn't just a decision-making tool, it was an identity-defining moment. He chose the identity of a founder, a visionary, and a pioneer, and the world responded to that choice. So reflect deeply on this truth. Your identity will always determine the size of your success. You cannot outperform your self-image. You cannot build a life bigger than the one you believe you deserve. You cannot attract opportunities that your identity rejects. Billionaires understand this, which is why they invest more in shaping their minds than in accumulating possessions. They know that once the internal foundation is built, the external world rearranges itself to match it. The question now becomes, who are you willing to become? Not what you want, not what you wish for, not what you hope will happen someday. Who are you willing to identify as internally, starting now? Because the moment you choose that identity and begin walking in alignment with it, your life begins to move in a new direction. And if you are consistent, if you nurture that identity every day, if you refuse to shrink back into old patterns, then wealth, true, lasting, expansive wealth, will eventually have no choice but to follow you. Topic 4. The power of long-term thinking. How billionaires escape the traps that keep most people stuck. If there is one trait that consistently separates billionaires from everyone else, it is their ability to think in decades while the rest of the world thinks in days. This difference may sound small, but it rewires everything. How they make decisions, how they respond to setbacks, how they interpret opportunities, and how they design their lives. Billionaires operate from a mental horizon so wide that temporary failures feel irrelevant compared to the long arc of what they are building. Meanwhile, most people are trapped inside the psychology of immediacy, seeking quick approval, quick comfort, quick wins, and quick results. And so they make small decisions that trap them in small lives. Long-term thinking is the doorway out of that trap, and every wealthy empire has been built by someone who mastered this mindset. You can see this difference clearly when you study Warren Buffett, a man whose entire fortune was built on patience. He once said, "The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient." And he wasn't speaking only about investing. He was revealing a principle about life itself. Buffett thinks in 20-year windows, sometimes 30, sometimes longer. He makes decisions today that may not pay off for decades because he understands something most people ignore. Time is the greatest multiplier of wealth. The longer your vision, the bigger your potential becomes. But to think long-term requires emotional maturity, self-control, and the willingness to delay gratification, traits that must be cultivated intentionally. Most people do not struggle financially because they lack intelligence or opportunity. They struggle because they anchor their decisions to short-term emotions instead of long-term outcomes. They quit too soon. They panic too soon. They judge results too soon. They look at a setback and assume it means stop rather than continue. They look at slow progress and assume it's failure rather than momentum. Their impatience sabotages what could have been extraordinary. Billionaires understand that greatness is built slowly, unevenly, and often invisibly long before the world notices. They do not need immediate results to validate their actions because their belief is rooted in a long-term vision that has already taken shape in their minds. This mindset becomes even clearer when you look at companies like Amazon, Tesla, and Meta. In the early years of Amazon, Jeff Bezos repeatedly told shareholders that profitability was not his priority. He wasn't building for the next quarter, he was building for the next quarter century. When critics laughed at him for reinvesting everything, when analysts mocked his strategy, when people said his ideas were unsustainable, he kept his eyes on a long-term outcome that few people could see. Today, the critics are silent, and Amazon is one of the most powerful companies in the world. Not because Bezos was lucky, but because he mastered the psychological discipline of long-term thinking. The same pattern appears in Elon Musk's story. Years before Tesla was profitable, before electric cars were mainstream, before governments were funding sustainability programs, Musk was already planning a multi-decade roadmap. He was thinking about planetary evolution, renewable energy, and humanity's future on Mars. While most people struggle to plan their next month, he was imagining the next century. That level of thinking expands the mind in ways that naturally lead to revolutionary outcomes. It is not that these individuals are superhuman, it is that they refuse to let short-term discomfort dictate long-term destiny. Long-term thinking gives billionaires psychological resilience that most people never develop. When you hold a decades-long vision, temporary failure loses its emotional grip. You don't crumble when things don't work immediately. You don't panic when results are slow. You don't allow fear to override action. Instead, you interpret every challenge as part of the process, not a sign to retreat. Thomas Edison is the perfect example. When asked how he felt about failing thousands of times while inventing the light bulb, he famously replied, "I didn't fail. I learned thousands of ways it didn't work." That is long-term thinking in its purest form, the willingness to endure temporary frustration in exchange for the monumental future waiting on the other side. But there is another reason long-term thinking creates billionaires. It activates parts of the brain associated with creativity, strategy, and innovation. When you think beyond the immediate moment, your brain begins seeing patterns, connections, and opportunities that short-term thinking blinds you to. You stop reacting to circumstances and start designing them. You stop chasing small wins and start building the foundations for massive ones. You stop evaluating decisions based on how they feel right now and start evaluating them based on what they build over time. This shift alone separates those who accumulate wealth from those who stagnate. Take, for example, the story of Reed Hastings, co-founder of Netflix. When Netflix first started mailing DVDs, the business model didn't look revolutionary. It looked fragile. But Hastings wasn't building a DVD rental service. In his mind, even in the early days, Netflix was a long-term vision of on-demand global streaming. That technology didn't exist yet. The infrastructure didn't exist yet. The licensing system didn't exist yet. But the possibility existed in his long-term mind, and as he took steps aligned with that vision, the world eventually caught up. Today, Netflix is a multi-billion-dollar company that reshaped entertainment, not because Hastings followed trends, but because he thought so far ahead that he became the trend. Long-term thinking also dissolves envy, comparison, and insecurity. When your timeline is decades, you stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. You stop feeling behind because you understand you are building something meant to withstand time. You stop rushing. You stop forcing. You stop panicking over what hasn't happened yet. Billionaires move differently because they are not racing against anyone else. They are building something timeless. Their identity is anchored not in speed, but in depth, not in immediate approval, but in eventual impact. This is what allows billionaires to endure seasons of invisibility. There are long periods where they receive no recognition, no applause, no validation, no guarantees. Yet they keep building. They keep experimenting. They keep refining. They keep showing up. Most people crumble under invisibility because they tie their motivation to external validation. Billionaires tie their motivation to the vision itself. They don't need the world to see them yet because they already see themselves. They know that the seeds they plant now, even the ones buried deep beneath failure, will eventually grow if they continue watering them. But perhaps the most empowering truth is this: long-term thinking is not exclusive to billionaires. It is available to anyone who chooses to step out of the cycle of instant gratification and step into the mindset of deliberate creation. It begins by asking questions like, where do I want to be in 10 years? What type of person do I need to become to reach that vision? What skills do I need to build now that will pay off later? What sacrifices today will create freedom tomorrow? These questions shift the brain into a higher level of consciousness. They expand identity. They stretch possibility. They give meaning to struggle. They clarify direction. And once you begin thinking this way, your life reorganizes itself around the future instead of the present. The truth is simple but profound. Your long-term vision determines the size of your life. The smaller your timeline, the smaller your results. The moment you begin thinking like a billionaire, expansive, patient, strategic, resilient, your decisions transform. Your habits shift. Your energy elevates. You stop chasing shortcuts and start building foundations. And slowly, often quietly, your life begins to move in the direction of greatness. Long-term thinking is not just a mindset. It is a psychological superpower. And the moment you activate it, you step into the rare class of people capable of creating extraordinary wealth. Topic 5. How billionaires master emotional discipline to think clearly when others panic. If there is a secret power that billionaires rely on more than intelligence, more than opportunity, more than strategy, it is emotional discipline. While the world imagines billionaires as calculating geniuses or lucky visionaries, the truth is far more psychological. They have trained their minds to remain calm, rational, and focused when most people would collapse under pressure. They don't just work harder, they think clearer. They don't avoid fear, they manage it. They don't run from uncertainty. They navigate through it with a level of composure that turns chaos into advantage. Emotional discipline is the internal armor that allows billionaires to take risks, recover from failure, and continue creating when everything around them seems to be falling apart. Consider the financial crisis of 2008. The world was panicking, markets were crashing, companies were collapsing. Everyday people were selling assets in fear, trying desperately to protect what little they had left. Yet during this period, Warren Buffett was investing billions. He wasn't ignoring the chaos. He saw the same headlines, the same fear, the same predictions of disaster. But he also understood that panic distorts perception. He remained calm because emotional discipline had trained him to evaluate opportunity objectively, not emotionally. While others allowed fear to dictate their decisions, Buffett allowed clarity to lead him. That is why, while millions were losing money, he was setting up the foundation for returns that would multiply in the years that followed. Emotional discipline is not the absence of emotion. It is mastery over your reactions. Most people make decisions from a place of stress, fear, frustration, or impulsivity. These states shut down logical thinking and activate survival mode. When the brain enters survival mode, creativity dies, strategic thinking collapses, and long-term vision disappears. Billionaires know how to interrupt this spiral. They recognize the physical signs of emotional overwhelm and have conditioned themselves to pause, breathe, analyze, and choose their response instead of reacting unconsciously. This ability alone separates them from the majority of the population. Look at someone like Richard Branson. He has faced failures so massive that most entrepreneurs would never recover. Virgin Cola failed, Virgin Brides failed, Virgin Cars failed, Virgin America nearly destroyed his financial foundation. Yet through each failure, he maintained an almost unshakable optimism and emotional steadiness. He didn't internalize failure as a reflection of his worth. He didn't panic or spiral into self-doubt. Instead, he approached each setback with curiosity rather than emotional collapse. This is emotional discipline in action, the ability to remain mentally stable while the world tests your resilience. But emotional discipline extends beyond responding to failure. It shapes how billionaires pursue success. They resist the temptation of instant gratification. They don't chase shiny distractions. They don't allow momentary emotions to hijack their long-term goals. When Jeff Bezos was criticized for reinvesting Amazon's profits year after year, he wasn't swayed by public opinion or pressure from analysts. He wasn't emotionally reactive. He was emotionally disciplined. He stayed aligned with his long-term strategy, even when the world misunderstood him. That ability to remain unaffected by external noise is one of the most powerful psychological advantages anyone can develop. This mindset also explains why billionaires are able to take enormous risks with confidence. They don't take risks impulsively. They take risks with emotional neutrality. They evaluate the upside and the downside without letting fear distort the analysis. When Elon Musk invested nearly all of his capital into Tesla and SpaceX, he wasn't acting recklessly. He was acting with clarity. He had accepted the emotional weight of potential failure long before making the decision. He had mentally prepared for the worst-case scenario. This allowed him to move forward without emotional turbulence. Most people never take big risks not because they lack opportunity, but because their emotional reactions overwhelm their rational thinking. Emotional discipline also shows up in how billionaires handle criticism. The average person internalizes negativity, allowing others' opinions to shape their self-image. Billionaires, however, treat criticism as feedback, not identity. They have developed an inner emotional boundary that prevents external voices from dictating their internal world. Oprah Winfrey faced waves of criticism, doubt, and public scrutiny throughout her career, yet she remained grounded in her truth. She did not crumble under pressure because she had built emotional habits that allowed her to withstand judgment without losing her sense of self. This resilience is not a personality trait, it is a trained discipline. Another critical aspect of emotional discipline is the ability to delay emotional gratification. Most people sabotage their long-term success because they allow short-term emotions to win the battle. They want comfort now. They want validation now. They want results now. Billionaires think differently. They understand that growth requires discomfort, that wealth requires patience, and that mastery requires emotional endurance. They willingly experience boredom, frustration, uncertainty, and temporary setbacks because they know these emotions are part of the process, not signs that they should stop. Neuroscience backs this up. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, planning, and decision-making, weakens when emotions take over. When someone panics, their brain literally loses access to its highest cognitive abilities. Billionaires strengthen this part of their brain by repeatedly exposing themselves to difficult situations without collapsing emotionally. Over time, they build mental muscle. They become capable of handling increasingly complex challenges with calmness and clarity. It is not that life gets easier, they get stronger. Emotional discipline also plays a massive role in maintaining consistency, which is one of the most overlooked drivers of wealth. Anyone can be motivated for a week. Anyone can be focused when things are easy. But billionaires remain consistent even when motivation disappears, when results slow down, when doubt creeps in, and when progress feels invisible. They don't wait to feel like it. They don't wait for inspiration. They act from commitment, not emotion. They do the work regardless of their emotional state. This single habit separates dreamers from executors, hopeful thinkers from wealthy creators. Ultimately, emotional discipline is the foundation of every billionaire's success because it gives them control over the only thing that truly matters, their mind. When you control your emotions, you control your decisions. When you control your decisions, you control your outcomes. When you control your outcomes, you control your life. Emotional discipline frees you from the internal storms that paralyze the average person. It allows you to stay focused when others are distracted, to stay grounded when others are overwhelmed, and to stay resilient when others give up. The most empowering truth is that emotional discipline is a skill anyone can develop. You don't need money, status, or privilege to start. You only need awareness, intention, and practice. Every time you choose patience over panic, clarity over impulsiveness, curiosity over self-judgment, and long-term alignment over short-term emotion, you are training the same mental muscles that billionaires rely on daily. And as those muscles grow stronger, your life will begin to expand in ways that once felt impossible. Emotional discipline is not just part of the billionaire mindset. It is the beating heart of it. When you master your emotions, you gain access to a version of yourself capable of making extraordinary decisions, taking extraordinary actions, and creating extraordinary results. And in that internal mastery, wealth begins long before the world can see it. Topic 6. Why billionaires obsess over solving big problems, and how this mindset creates massive wealth. There is a fundamental difference between the problems most people focus on and the problems billionaires focus on. Most people devote their time and energy to solving small, immediate issues: how to pay a bill, how to stretch their salary, how to reduce a minor inconvenience, how to earn just enough to feel comfortable. They operate inside a cycle of micro-problems that keep their thinking small, their actions predictable, and their lives constrained. Billionaires, however, fixate on solving big problems, problems that affect entire industries, entire populations, and sometimes the future of humanity itself. This single shift in focus creates a psychological expansion so powerful that wealth becomes a natural byproduct rather than the primary pursuit. The bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity, and billionaires understand that solving problems at scale is the most reliable pathway to extraordinary success. Look at Elon Musk, a figure often misunderstood but impossible to ignore. His companies were not created to make him rich. They were created to solve enormous problems. SpaceX exists because he believes humanity must become multiplanetary. Tesla exists because he saw the urgent need to transition the world to sustainable energy. Neuralink exists because he recognizes the growing gap between human intelligence and machine intelligence and wants to ensure our species evolves accordingly. These are not small ambitions. These are not problems most people even think about. Yet by dedicating himself to solving problems on this scale, Musk unlocked billions in wealth. Wealth that arrived because he committed to massive value creation, not because he chased money. This pattern appears again and again among billionaires. They do not ask, "How can I make money?" They ask, "What problem is so significant that solving it would change the world?" Jeff Bezos asked how he could build the most customer-centric company on the planet and revolutionize commerce itself. Mark Zuckerberg wanted to connect humanity in a way that transcended geography. Sarah Blakely wanted to create a product that empowered women to feel confident in their clothing. These individuals didn't stumble into success. They identified pain points that millions of people shared and built solutions powerful enough to transform entire markets. When most people encounter a big problem, they shrink. They think a problem's size is a reason to avoid it. Billionaires think a problem's size is a reason to pursue it. Large problems indicate massive demand. Massive demand indicates massive opportunity. Where others see obstacles, billionaires see open doors to innovation, dominance, and expansion. It's not that they are fearless, it's that they have trained their minds to interpret big problems as invitations rather than threats. This mindset emerges from a key psychological truth. The human brain grows in proportion to the size of the problem it is challenged to solve. When you focus on small issues, your thinking becomes confined. When you focus on enormous issues, your creativity, ambition, and resilience expand. You begin developing the cognitive strength required to operate at higher levels. Solving big problems forces you to develop new skills, build stronger networks, create better strategies, and evolve your identity into someone capable of leading at scale. This internal growth becomes the seed of external wealth. Big problems also require long-term thinking, emotional discipline, and powerful vision, all characteristics of billionaires. They know that solving major issues takes time, experimentation, and resilience. They are willing to embrace the uncertainty and complexity that come with ambitious projects. Most people crumble under uncertainty. Billionaires treat uncertainty as raw material, something they can shape slowly, strategically, and creatively. This mindset explains why the world's wealthiest individuals are often drawn to industries others consider too complicated or too risky. Energy, transportation, healthcare, global logistics, artificial intelligence, finance, education. These fields are filled with problems so large that most entrepreneurs don't even attempt to compete. But billionaires thrive there because complexity creates barriers to entry, and barriers to entry create opportunity for those who have the psychological stamina to persist. But there is another dimension to this mindset, one that is deeply emotional and often overlooked. Billionaires genuinely care about solving problems that matter. Their passion is not manufactured for profit. It comes from a very real internal drive to improve something meaningful. When Oprah Winfrey launched her media empire, she wasn't focused on becoming rich. She was focused on helping people heal, grow, and transform. Her wealth emerged because she solved emotional and psychological problems millions of people carried silently. When Howard Schultz expanded Starbucks, he wasn't focused on selling coffee. He was focused on creating community, connection, and a third place for people to feel seen and valued. When Reed Hastings built Netflix, he wasn't trying to become a billionaire. He simply wanted to eliminate the frustration of late fees and create a better way for people to experience entertainment. Big problems become billion-dollar opportunities when they are approached with authenticity, empathy, and innovation. This is why the billionaire mindset cannot be replicated by people who chase money without purpose. Money alone is not a strong enough motivator to endure the struggles that come with solving big problems. Comfort collapses, excitement fades, motivation disappears, only purpose remains. Billionaires persist because the problem they are solving matters deeply to them. Their emotional fuel is stronger than temporary frustration. Their identity is intertwined with the impact they want to create. Their vision is bigger than their obstacles. Solving big problems also creates a ripple effect of opportunity. When you solve an issue for millions of people, you become indispensable. You become trusted. You become respected. You become someone who contributes value on a scale that few people are willing to attempt. And value, at its core, is the foundation of wealth. Wealth flows toward value. Wealth amplifies value. Wealth rewards value. Billionaires attract money because they generate solutions that the world desperately needs. But here is the most empowering truth. Anyone can adopt this mindset. You don't need billions in the bank to start thinking like a problem solver. You only need to shift your focus from "how can I fix my immediate discomfort" to "how can I create something meaningful that solves a real problem?" When you begin thinking in terms of contribution rather than survival, your creativity expands. Your confidence grows, your ideas evolve, and your energy rises to meet a higher purpose. The key is to stop underestimating your capacity. Most people believe big problems are reserved for special people, chosen people, brilliant people, wealthy people. But that belief is a lie that keeps the majority of humanity thinking small. The truth is that every billionaire started as a person facing ordinary problems, just like you. What made them extraordinary was their willingness to pursue problems bigger than themselves, their courage to attempt what others avoided, their determination to refine ideas that initially seemed impossible, and their relentless persistence in continuing long after others would have stopped. The world does not reward those who avoid problems. It rewards those who solve them. And the larger the problem you decide to tackle, the more abundant the reward, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Solving something meaningful gives life depth, direction, and purpose. Wealth becomes the echo of that contribution, not the goal. When you begin to see problems as opportunities, your life transforms. When you stop shrinking and start expanding, you step into the psychological territory where wealth is born. And when you choose to solve problems that matter, problems that make life better for others, you step onto the same path that every billionaire has walked before you. Not because you chased money, but because you committed to creating value at a level that reshapes the world. Topic 7. How billionaires build unbreakable confidence through small, consistent wins. There is a myth that billionaires possess some supernatural confidence, a level of certainty so powerful and unshakable that it propels them forward effortlessly. But when you study their lives closely, you discover something very different. Billionaire confidence is not loud. It is not arrogant. It is not based on ego. It is built slowly, deliberately, and quietly through a long series of small, consistent wins that compound over time. Confidence for billionaires is not a personality trait. They were not born with it. It is a skill they cultivated, an internal foundation they strengthened piece by piece until it became unbreakable. While most people wait to feel confident before taking action, billionaires take action to generate confidence. You can see this clearly in the story of Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx. Before she was a billionaire, she was selling fax machines door to door and being rejected dozens of times a day. Yet every small victory, every conversation that didn't end in humiliation, every idea she dared to pursue, every step she took toward her dream became another brick in her confidence. When she walked into Neiman Marcus to pitch Spanx, she didn't feel like a billionaire. She felt like a woman who had practiced believing in herself long enough to make confidence a habit. That habit, not external success, is what laid the foundation for everything that came later. This is how billionaire confidence works. It's not instant. It's not glamorous. It's not the result of a single defining moment. It accumulates like interest. The problem is that most people never experience this compounding effect because they never allow themselves to start small. They believe confidence must come first, so they wait. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel qualified. They wait for approval. They wait for motivation. They wait for external signs that it's finally the right time. Billionaires know this. Waiting is a trap. They know confidence is not something you feel before action. It is something you earn through action. Take Jeff Bezos during the early days of Amazon. He didn't know if the company would succeed, and he certainly didn't walk into his garage with the confidence of someone who would one day become the richest man on earth. But he created small wins, processing early orders, improving the customer experience, refining systems, building team culture, testing ideas, adjusting strategies. Every small win reinforced the belief that he could build something meaningful. This belief grew into confidence. That confidence grew into courage, and that courage fueled decisions bold enough to change the world. Confidence begins as a whisper, not a roar. Small wins matter more than motivation because they reshape the brain. Neuroscience shows that every time we complete a task, achieve a goal, or make progress, even tiny progress, the brain releases dopamine, the chemical responsible for motivation and reinforcement. Billionaires leverage this mechanism intentionally. They design their days around actions that create momentum. They celebrate progress, not perfection. They reward themselves emotionally for showing up, for trying again, for learning, for experimenting, for being persistent. Over time, this rewires their identity. They stop seeing themselves as beginners and start seeing themselves as builders. This is why billionaire confidence feels so authentic. It doesn't depend on external validation. It's rooted in evidence they created for themselves through repeated action. Each small win becomes a vote for the person they are becoming. And over time, the votes accumulate until the identity is undeniable. In contrast, most people try to build confidence from imagination alone, positive thinking without corresponding action. The mind cannot believe in a version of yourself that you never act on. Billionaires bridge that gap by aligning identity with behavior daily. Thomas Edison provides another powerful example. His confidence didn't come from inventing the light bulb. It came from surviving thousands of failed experiments and discovering that none of them could break his belief in himself. Each attempt was a small win, not because it succeeded, but because he tried again. When the world sees failure, billionaires see resilience building. When others see embarrassment, billionaires see emotional strength forming. When most people quit, billionaires gather evidence that they are capable of enduring more than they realized. Another essential truth about billionaire confidence is that it grows faster when aligned with purpose. Purpose gives meaning to small wins. It transforms tedious tasks into steps towards something greater. It turns uncertainty into a worthwhile challenge. Elon Musk did not endure the emotional and financial strain of nearly losing Tesla and SpaceX because he wanted to prove himself. He endured because he believed deeply in the purpose behind those companies. Purpose gives confidence roots, so deep that they cannot be shaken by temporary storms. When your mission is bigger than your fear, confidence becomes the natural companion on your journey. This is where most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They underestimate small wins. They dismiss baby steps. They expect overnight confidence. They want internal certainty without the discipline of consistent action. They set goals too big, fail immediately, and assume they aren't capable. Billionaires do the opposite. They break big visions into manageable steps. They build confidence through repetition. They reinforce identity through progress. They understand that self-belief grows the same way wealth grows, through compounding. Confidence also expands through exposure to discomfort. When billionaires push themselves into new territory, they expand their emotional tolerance. They become less afraid of embarrassment, less controlled by fear, less intimidated by risk. Confidence is not built in comfort. It is built in challenge. Oprah Winfrey became confident as a broadcaster not because she was naturally gifted, but because she showed up repeatedly in rooms where she felt out of place. She learned to trust her intuition. She learned to own her voice. She learned to carry herself with self-worth. Her confidence didn't come from success. Success came from the confidence she slowly built. We must also recognize that billionaire confidence is deeply humble. They know they don't know everything. They know they will make mistakes. They know the road will challenge them. But humility becomes confidence when paired with curiosity. Billionaires ask questions. They listen. They learn. They surround themselves with people who know more than they do. They treat ignorance not as a flaw, but as a doorway. This allows their confidence to be grounded, steady, and adaptable. The irony is this: the world often misinterprets billionaire confidence as arrogance, when in reality it is simply the natural consequence of years of showing up, failing forward, learning continuously, and building internal evidence of capability. It is not ego, it is earned assurance. It is not luck, it is the reward for consistency. And anyone willing to follow this path can cultivate the same unshakable foundation. The most empowering truth of all is that small wins are available to everyone. They do not require connections, money, or exceptional talent. They require action, tiny, consistent action that aligns with the person you want to become. When you choose progress over perfection, when you honor your commitments to yourself, when you build momentum one small step at a time, you create the internal architecture of confidence that cannot be taken away from you. This is how billionaires become unbreakable. Not through extraordinary talent, but through extraordinary persistence. Not through grand victories, but through small wins repeated until they reshape reality. Confidence is the quiet force behind every major success story, and it is built the same way wealth is built, one intentional step at a time. Topic 8. The Billionaire Habit of Relentless Learning. Why their minds never stop expanding. If there is one pattern that appears across nearly every billionaire's life, across industries, personalities, backgrounds, and eras, it is their obsession with learning. Not casual learning, not occasional learning. Relentless, disciplined, almost compulsive learning. Billionaires do not treat knowledge as something they acquire in school and forget afterward. They treat it as a lifelong necessity, a personal responsibility, a daily ritual. Their wealth is a reflection of how fast their minds evolve, how wide their curiosity extends, and how deeply they commit to intellectual growth. While most people stop learning the moment life becomes comfortable, billionaires understand that comfort is precisely the moment when learning matters most. Warren Buffett famously spends up to 80% of his day reading, not because he is bored, but because he knows information compounds just like money does. The more he learns, the better his decisions become. The better his decisions become, the more his wealth multiplies. This principle may sound simple, but it is revolutionary when applied consistently. Most people underestimate how much their lives could transform if they dedicated even 1 hour a day to intentional learning. Billionaires don't underestimate it. They live by it. The habit of learning is not just intellectual for them. It is strategic. The world is always changing. Technology evolves, markets shift, consumer behavior adapts, new industries rise, old ones crumble. The average person gets left behind because they cling to outdated knowledge and familiar patterns. Billionaires thrive because they anticipate change before it arrives. They stay ahead of trends because they study them. They spot opportunities early because they understand patterns others overlook. They make decisions with clarity because they recognize what the future will demand before the world realizes it. Consider Bill Gates, who has read at least 50 books a year for decades. His success is not simply the result of building Microsoft, it is the result of constantly expanding his thinking, even after becoming one of the richest individuals on the planet. His curiosity spans energy, global health, climate change, and education reform. By the time the world begins discussing a major issue, Gates has often studied it deeply enough to understand solutions that others haven't yet imagined. His learning fuels his impact, and his impact fuels his legacy. This relentless learning also explains why billionaires are often involved in multiple industries. Their minds move across disciplines. They connect ideas that seem unrelated. They innovate by combining knowledge from fields that rarely interact. When Steve Jobs studied calligraphy in college, a seemingly useless class, he had no idea that those lessons would later influence the beautiful typography and design philosophy of Apple computers. That connection was possible because his mind was open enough to integrate knowledge from unexpected places. Most people block this kind of integration because they limit their learning to what feels immediately practical. Billionaires learn widely. They learn deeply. They learn continuously. This gives their minds the flexibility required to navigate complexity, adapt quickly, and think creatively under pressure. There is also something profoundly emotional about how billionaires learn. They approach knowledge with humility. They admit when they don't know something. They ask questions even when they are the most experienced person in the room. They surround themselves with people who challenge their thinking rather than validate it. They are not threatened by intelligence. They are drawn to it. This humility accelerates their growth because it frees them from the prison of ego. The average person, however, often avoids learning situations that make them feel inexperienced or uncomfortable. They want to appear competent. They want to feel prepared. They want to avoid embarrassment. Billionaires are the opposite. They willingly enter spaces where they are the least knowledgeable. They seek out mentors. They learn from competitors. They consume information from diverse sources. They embrace the feeling of not knowing because they understand that ignorance is temporary, but avoiding learning has lifelong consequences. This mindset becomes especially visible when billionaires fail. Instead of internalizing failure as a reflection of their worth, they study it. They extract lessons. They identify patterns. They adjust strategies. They learn what didn't work so they can discover what will. Most people respond to failure with emotion, embarrassment, frustration, disappointment. Billionaires respond with analysis. They know failure is a teacher with lessons no classroom can provide. This is why billionaire comebacks are so powerful. When someone without a learning mindset falls, they often stay down because they don't know how to adapt. When a billionaire falls, they rise stronger because they have learned something essential about themselves, their business, or their industry. Their resilience is not magical. It is learned resilience, built through years of absorbing knowledge, sharpening thinking, and expanding perspective. Another critical element of billionaire learning is intentional exposure. They deliberately place themselves in environments that stretch them. They attend conferences, read books outside their field, study global markets, observe rising technologies, and engage in conversations with people who think differently. This constant exposure creates cognitive expansion. It prevents mental stagnation. It keeps the brain active, creative, and primed for innovation. Elon Musk once admitted that he learned how to build rockets by reading books and asking questions. That level of learning is extreme, of course, but it reveals something important. Billionaire minds do not accept the limits imposed by expertise. They are willing to learn anything, no matter how complex, if it aligns with their mission. They believe knowledge is accessible to anyone willing to pursue it with enough determination. This belief shatters one of the most damaging myths of all, that only geniuses can achieve massive success. Billionaires prove that curiosity is more important than raw intelligence. Persistence is more important than natural talent. Humility is more important than confidence. The mind is not fixed. It is a tool that sharpens with consistent use. Anyone can learn anything if they commit to the practice long enough. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of billionaire learning is how personally empowering it is. Learning builds self-trust. Every time you gain knowledge, you expand your ability to make decisions, solve problems, and navigate uncertainty. You no longer rely solely on luck or external support because your mind becomes your greatest asset. Billionaires feel confident taking risks because they trust their ability to learn their way through any challenge. They believe in their capacity to grow. That belief is one of the strongest psychological forces in the world. And the beautiful truth is this: relentless learning is available to everyone. You do not need wealth to read books, consume ideas, ask questions, or study your craft. You do not need connections to learn from experts through interviews, podcasts, biographies, lectures, and online platforms. You do not need privilege to develop a habit of daily personal growth. You only need willingness. You only need curiosity. You only need the desire to become more than you currently are. When you make learning a daily ritual, your entire life begins to transform. Your thinking deepens, your creativity increases, your confidence grows, your decisions improve. And slowly, quietly, consistently, you begin to think like the individuals who shape industries and change the world. Learning is not a luxury. It is a multiplier. It doesn't just increase your knowledge, it increases your future. This is why billionaires never stop learning. Their minds are always expanding, always absorbing, always evolving. They know that the moment they stop growing, they begin declining. Their commitment to learning is their commitment to greatness. And if you adopt the same habit, relentlessly and intentionally, your mind will expand in ways that pull your life toward extraordinary success. Topic 9. The billionaire relationship with failure. Why they run toward what others run away from. If you truly want to understand why billionaires think differently, you must study their relationship with failure. Not the kind of failure you imagine as a temporary setback. Not the kind of failure that you can easily recover from. Billionaires face monumental failures. Public failures, humiliating failures, financially devastating failures, failures so heavy that most people would abandon everything and disappear quietly into a more predictable life. Yet, instead of running from failure, billionaires move toward it. They treat failure not as the enemy of success, but as the doorway to it. This mindset is perhaps the greatest psychological separator between people who grow exponentially and those who remain stuck. Consider the story of Henry Ford. Before revolutionizing the automotive industry, he experienced multiple business collapses. His early ventures failed so completely that investors refused to work with him again. But Ford did not interpret these collapses as evidence that he lacked ability. He saw them as data. He studied what went wrong. He refined his systems. He restructured his vision. And he tried again, because in his mind, failure wasn't a signal to stop. It was a signal to adjust. This is the mindset of billionaires. They do not fear failure because they know failure is part of the process of becoming unstoppable. Most people have been conditioned to think that failure is embarrassing, shameful, or a sign that they are not good enough. They internalize it as a judgment of their worth. Billionaires see failure as feedback, not identity. They detach their self-esteem from their setbacks. They allow themselves to make mistakes without collapsing emotionally. And because they do not get trapped in self-judgment, they are able to learn, adapt, and improve at speeds most people never experience. This mindset becomes even more powerful when you look at someone like J.K. Rowling. Before she became a billionaire, she was rejected by 12 publishers, living on welfare, and struggling to provide for her daughter as a single mother. Every rejection could have been interpreted as confirmation that she wasn't meant to succeed. But Rowling allowed failure to strengthen her determination. She recognized that failure was pushing her to refine her work, deepen her emotional resilience, and clarify her purpose. Her story is a reminder that failure often precedes breakthrough because it forces you to grow in ways success never could. But billionaires don't just survive failure. They actively seek experiences where failure is possible. They pursue risks that have the potential to expand their lives, businesses, and futures. They willingly engage in projects that might fail because they understand something essential. If failure is impossible, growth is impossible. If the outcome is guaranteed, the challenge is too small. Billionaires know that the only way to build extraordinary success is to operate at a level where failure is always on the table. This is why their decisions seem bold. This is why their achievements seem superhuman. They are willing to venture into arenas where most people refuse to even take the first step. Elon Musk embodies this mindset vividly. He has repeatedly stated that failure was not only possible, but expected in the early days of SpaceX. His first 3 rocket launches failed spectacularly, nearly bankrupting him and destroying his credibility. But Musk viewed each failed launch as progress. He studied every malfunction. He analyzed every miscalculation. He pushed his team to learn faster, innovate smarter, and try again. If he had interpreted failure emotionally instead of strategically, the aerospace industry would look completely different today. Failure sharpened him. Failure refined him. Failure transformed him into someone capable of doing what others believed was impossible. This mindset is not solely about bravery, it is about perspective. Billionaires interpret failure as part of the journey, not a deviation from it. They expect failure. They prepare for failure. They learn to coexist with failure, and because of this, they are able to keep moving when others stop. The average person sees failure as a wall. Billionaires see failure as a doorway that only a few people have the courage to walk through. Failure also reveals character. It exposes weaknesses, blind spots, insecurities, and emotional patterns. Most people hide from this exposure because it feels uncomfortable. Billionaires embrace it because it accelerates growth. They use failure as a mirror. They study how they react. They study the flaws in their thinking. They study the gaps in their strategy. They treat failure as an instructor with lessons they cannot get anywhere else. This is why they evolve rapidly and continuously. They treat life as a classroom and failure as an advanced level course. Another distinguishing factor is how billionaires rebound from failure. They recover quickly, not because they avoid pain, but because they don't dwell on it. They allow themselves to feel disappointment, but they do not stay there. They redirect their energy into the next step, the next idea, the next attempt. They don't ruminate endlessly on what went wrong. They remain focused on what can be improved. Failure becomes fuel rather than paralysis. Take Howard Schultz, the visionary behind Starbucks. He was rejected by over 200 investors when trying to raise money for his coffee concept. Each rejection could have been the end. Each no could have broken his spirit. But Schultz had a vision larger than his fear of failure. He believed in the emotional experience he wanted to create, a place of community, comfort, and connection. His belief was stronger than the pain of rejection. And because he continued, Starbucks became a global phenomenon that reshaped the culture of coffee. The billionaire relationship with failure also creates a psychological freedom that most people never experience. When you stop fearing failure, you become dangerous in the best possible way. You become capable of taking leaps that others wouldn't dare to attempt. You become willing to explore paths that seem uncertain. You become more creative, more innovative, more courageous, more resilient. Fear no longer controls your decisions. Failure no longer threatens your identity. And this internal liberation opens the door to opportunities that remain invisible to those who are held hostage by self-doubt. This mindset extends beyond business and into personal life. Billionaires understand that relationships, habits, health, leadership, and emotional intelligence also require risking failure. They grow through difficult conversations. They evolve through uncomfortable feedback. They refine themselves through moments of vulnerability. They treat personal failure the same way they treat professional failure, as a chance to become a more powerful version of themselves. What makes this mindset truly transformative is that failure becomes less frightening the more you face it. Each time you fail and recover, you build emotional strength. You build psychological endurance. You build self-trust. And with each repetition, failure loses its power over you. It becomes familiar, manageable, and even welcomed. Most people avoid failure to protect their ego. Billionaires embrace failure to expand their identity. And here is the most liberating truth. You do not need billions of dollars, connections, or special talent to change your relationship with failure. You only need willingness. You only need courage. You only need the desire to grow. The moment you stop fearing failure is the moment you become unstoppable. The moment you stop interpreting failure as a verdict is the moment you begin living freely. The moment you decide that failure is part of your evolution is the moment the world begins to open for you. Billionaires think differently because they fail differently. They do not let it break them. They let it shape them. They let it strengthen them. They let it refine them. And in that refinement, they become the kind of person capable of achieving extraordinary success. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. And when you embrace that truth fully, your life will transform in ways you never imagined. Topic 10. The moment you decide to think differently, the beginning of your own billionaire mindset. There comes a moment in every transformation when the information you've absorbed is no longer just interesting or inspiring, but undeniable. A moment when something inside you shifts so deeply that you can't go back to the way you used to think, because you've seen too much, felt too much, realized too much. That moment is now. Throughout this journey, you've seen that billionaires aren't extraordinary because of money, privilege, or destiny. They are extraordinary because of how they think, how they act, how they respond to adversity, and how they choose to interpret the world. Their power was built long before the world recognized it. And now, you understand that this power is not exclusive. It is available to anyone willing to shift from limitation to possibility, from fear to courage, from reaction to direction, from self-doubt to self-leadership. The real difference between those who create extraordinary lives and those who don't comes down to one decision: the decision to take responsibility for the way you think. Because once you control your thinking, you control your choices. Once you control your choices, you control your future. You've seen how billionaires cultivate vision when others cling to the present, how they build identity before success arrives, how they turn failure into a teacher, how they use emotional discipline to stay clear-headed under pressure, how they solve massive problems rather than obsessing over small ones, how they pursue relentless learning, how they build confidence through consistent action. These are not tactics. They are ways of being. And they are available to you right now, regardless of where you come from or what your current circumstances look like. This is the truth you must hold on to. Your life will not change because you simply know these principles. It will change because you begin to embody them. It will change because you stop waiting for permission and start acting like someone who is building a future worth living. It will change because you begin making choices that align with the version of yourself you want to become. It will change because you stop retreating from fear and start moving toward possibility. Transformation is not about speed, it is about direction. And today, you have the chance to choose a new direction. Think of every billionaire, every visionary, every world changer you've learned about in this video. Each of them started exactly where you are now, with a desire to grow, a willingness to think differently, and a commitment to refuse limitation. They weren't guaranteed success. They weren't immune to failure. They weren't handed a perfect path. They became extraordinary because they made a decision most people never make, the decision to lead themselves boldly into the unknown. Wealth did not create that mindset. That mindset created wealth. So now the question is no longer, can I think like a billionaire? You've already proven you can, simply by being here, absorbing this, feeling something awaken inside you. The real question is, will I choose to live like someone capable of becoming extraordinary? Because the door is open, the path is clear, the principles are timeless, and your potential is far greater than you've allowed yourself to believe. As you move forward, remember this: small steps compound into big change. One decision today becomes momentum tomorrow. One shift in identity becomes a new reality. One moment of courage becomes a lifetime of possibility. You don't need to have everything figured out. You only need to begin. The billionaire mindset is not about money. It is about mastery of self. And the moment you choose to master your thoughts, your actions, and your vision, you begin building a future that expands far beyond anything you've experienced before. This is your moment, your invitation, your turning point. The world is full of people waiting for life to change, but the ones who rise, the ones who build, innovate, inspire, and lead are the ones who decide to change themselves first. Today, you stand at the threshold of that decision. Step forward with confidence. Step forward with purpose. Step forward with the mindset of someone who is ready to create wealth not just in their bank account, but in their identity, their possibilities, and their impact on the world. You are not the same person you were when you began this video. Something has expanded, something has awakened, and if you choose to follow this shift, your life will never be the same. If this message awakened something inside you, if even one insight shifted the way you see your potential, then don't let this be the end of your journey. Let it be the beginning. Subscribe to the channel now so you never miss the tools, the mindset shifts, and the breakthroughs that will guide you toward the life you know you're meant to create. Like this video if it spoke to the deepest part of you, and share it with someone who's ready to think bigger, live bolder, and step into their own abundance. And before you go, leave a comment below telling me which billionaire mindset principle resonated most with you. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. This is your moment. Your evolution starts now, and I'll be here, walking with you every step of the way.